1 year on from the Lismore floods, some residents are still cooking on camp stoves. Others are still waiting to rebuild. Joining me live now is the Nationals leader, David Littleproud. Thanks so much for your time. This spans across, both governments, all three governments, including local governments as well. Do you believe that all that can be done is being done? We know these things do take time.
It is, but it's all too slow, way too slow. When you've got 80% of households not living in their own home 12 months after, 50% roughly of the businesses that lost their source of income are still not back into business 12 months on, you have to reflect, you have to understand and appreciate they haven't got it right. They haven't got it all right. This just takes courage of bureaucracy to make decisions. And while Murray Watt was Shadow Emergency Services Minister, he was very prepared to give gratuitous advice from the sidelines, but I think he's getting a real understanding of how complex some of these issues are. And it's important that all levels of government work together. And I've met with the Mayor there. I've got to say the Mayor on the ground is just as frustrated with the state and federal tiers of government. He's got the local knowledge and is hearing from locals daily about what needs to happen, but he doesn't have the pen that signs the checks. He's simply the one that's trying to get through the bureaucracy. So it's important that we empower local government to be that conduit, that common sense about what communities need. And I think there's some big lessons here, but it's important there's some courage of both state and federal governments in just making some decisions, because when 80% of people aren't back in their homes, something's not right.
Yeah, what kind of courage are you talking about? I mean, the town has resisted picking up and moving altogether. Some homes, some residents do want to move to higher ground. What's the answer here?
Well, it's about making that decision, making the options available, making sure that all tiers of government, so the planning pen with council all the way through. So if people want to move and they want to move to a different part of the town, then there's an opportunity for them to do that and to be able to undertake. If there's people that want to stay and their homes can be mitigated by lifting it, by doing other infrastructure means, then undertake that. Let's just get on with the job. But I think there's been enough time to plan. There's now time for action. I think that's where the frustration is, where council, I think, is limited and having been on the ground with the land that is available to them because of the topography of the land. Yeah. But there's also some decisions that need to be made around flood mitigation. And there's a CSIRO report that was being undertaken, and the Greens are in the road of this. And this is where some courage is going to have to be taken about worrying about the environment rather than human beings, that we may have to have mitigation dams along the river to be able to protect these communities. That's where the courage and conviction of decision making needs to take place, and that's where common sense needs to prevail. And that's what we're saying, is just let those on the ground make those decisions and get on with it. Empower them, and state and federal government, Murray Watt should be on the ground there, empowering them and standing over the top, because he pays the bills on this one.
Well, there's a pretty good opportunity here. There's a state election just around the corner. This should be right front and centre, shouldn't it? We should be getting both leaders to say what they will do, how quickly and how much money.
Oh, exactly. And this is just about delivery. And you've got to appreciate, as I was Emergency Service Minister through the bushfires, everyone heals at a different pace. So some people aren't ready to move on, and they're not ready to make that decision whether to stay and lift their homes or to try and move on to another place, a higher ground. So you've got to appreciate that it's not a perfect science, but there needs to be a line in the sand where there's leadership, and that courage and conviction of that leadership needs to come through. And yes, I think that it is important that state leaders and federal leaders are there driving that at the direction with local government at the core of giving that advice.
And it's also about forward planning as well, isn't it, Mr. Littleproud? Because at the moment we've had such huge flooding events. We've had so much rain along the east coast. It seems to me that we should be preparing for pretty ferocious bushfires in the next couple of years. Can you plan this far out? Should it be done?
Well, definitely, and this is where common sense needs to prevail, is that we have to understand we live in an environment, we have to actually try and manage that to protect human life. That's the most sacrosanct thing that governments can do. And that means you can draw on, but experience of Indigenous Australians. One of the things when I was Emergency Service Minister was to try and get Indigenous Australians to do more of the cool burning, to make sure that those burnings were done to reduce the fuel loads. That's common sense. It's also about the $7.4 billion we had set aside to build dams. That's how you mitigate floods, is to build dams to hold storage, to take water out of the river system to reduce the level of the flow. That's common sense, but you have to understand you have to work within the environment, and you can't let the environment be the only determining factor whether humans live or die or not. And this is where common sense needs to prevail, and you need to be courageous, whether it be with cool burning, whether it be with digging some holes and storing some of this water when it's there. That's common sense. That's what leadership needs to be undertaken, and that's what we're saying. Federal government, we had $7.4 billion. Go and burn some diesel, dig some holes, and get this done properly. Mitigate to save lives, to save businesses, and to save homes.